this is Reina's story, and today we're gonna read Percy Jakson and the Olympians 1. Chapter 1. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth, and try to lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great. Read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us. And once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too. They'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Percy Jakson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. I could start at the point in my short, miserable life to prove it. But things really started going bad last May, when our 6th grade class took a field trip to Manhattan. 28 mental case kids and 2 teachers on a yellow school bus heading to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know, it sounds like torture. Most Yancey field trips were. But Mr. Booner, our Latin teacher, was leading this trip, so I had hopes. Mr. Booner was this middle-aged guy in motorized wheelchair. He had thinning hair and a scruffy beard and a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be cool, but he told stories and jokes and let us play games in class, but also had this awesome collection of Roman armor and weapons, so he was the only teacher whose class didn't put me to sleep. I hoped the trip would be okay. At least, I hoped that for once I wouldn't get in trouble. Boy, was I wrong. See, bad things happen to me in the field trips. Like at my 5th grade school, when we went to Saratoga battlefield, I had this ancient as a revolutionary war cannon. I wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course, I got expelled anyway. And before that, at my 1st grade school, when we took a behind-the-scenes tour of the Marine World Shark Pool, I sort of hit the wrong lever on the catwalk and our class took an unplanned swim. And the time before that, well, you get the idea. This trip, I was determined to be good. All the way to the city, I put up with Nancy Buffett and freckly red-headed Clementine girl, hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks and peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Grover was an easy target. He was scrawny. He cried when he got frustrated. He must have been held back several grades because he was the only 6th grader with the aim and a start of wispy beard on his chin. Top of all that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him from PE for the rest of the life because he had some kind of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him, but don't let that fool you. You should have seen him run when it was enchilada day in cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Buffett was throwing wads of sandwich that stuck in the curly brown hair, and she knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster was threatening me with death by in school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, or even mildly entertaining happened on this trip. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried to calm me down. It's okay, I like peanut butter. He dashed another piece of Nancy's lunch. That's it. I started to get up, but Grover pulled me back to my seat. You're already on probation, he reminded me. You know who'll get blamed if something happens. Looking back on it, I wish I decked Nancy Buffett right then and there. And school suspension would be nothing compared to a mess I was about to get myself in for. Mr. Bunner led the museum tour. He rode on the front of his wheelchair, guiding us through the big echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. It blew my mind that this stuff had survived for 2,000, 3,000 years. He gathered up around the 13-foot-tall stone column with the big sphinx on the top and started telling us how it was a grave marker, still for a girl about our age. He told us about the carvings on the sides. I was trying to listen to what he had to say because it was kind of interesting. But everybody around me was talking, and every time I told them to shut up, the other teacher chaperone, Mrs. Dawes, would give me the evil eye. Mrs. Dawes was the little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was 50 years old. She looked mean enough to ride a Harley right into your locker. She had come to Nancy halfway through the year when her last math teacher has a nervous breakdown. On her first day, Mrs. Dawes loved Nancy Buffett and figured I was a devil's spawn. She would point her crooked finger at me to get after-school detention for a month. One time, after she'd made me erase answers out of the old math workbook until midnight, I told Grover I didn't think Mrs. Dodds was human. He looked at me real serious and said, "You're absolutely right." Mr. Bunner kept talking about Greek funeral art. Finally, Nancy Buffett snickered something about the naked guy on the steel, and I turned around and said, "Will you shut up?" It came out louder than I meant to. The whole group laughed. Mr. Bunner stopped his story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "did you have a comment?" My face was totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Bunner pointed to one of the pictures on the still. "Perhaps you're telling us what the picture represents?" I looked at her craving. I felt a flush of relief because I actually recognized it. "That's Cronus eating his kids, right?" "Yes," Mr. Bunner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because..." Well, I racked my brain to remember. Cronus was the king god and... "God?" Mr. Bunner asked. "Titan," I corrected myself. "And he didn't trust his kids who were the gods. So, Cronus ate them, right?" But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Cronus a rock to eat instead. And later, when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Cronus, into bathing all his brothers and sisters. "Ew," said one of the girls behind me. And so there was the big fight between the gods and the Titans, I continued, and the gods won. Some snickers from the group. Behind me, Nancy Buffett mumbled to a friend, like we're going to use this in real life, like it's going to stay on our job applications. Please explain why Colonels ate these kids. And why, Mr. Jackson? Bruner said. No prepares, Miss Buffett. Excellent question. Does this matter in real life? Busted, Grover muttered. Shut up, Nancy hissed, her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got pegged too. Mr. Bunner was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had rather odd ears. I thought about his question and shrugged. I don't know, sir. I see. Mr. Bunner looked disappointed. Well, have credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Cronus a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him discourage his other 5 children, who, of course, being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him to pieces with his own scales, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, the darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dawes, would you lead us back outside? The class drifted up, the girls holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other around acting like dog fuse. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Bunner said, Mr. Jackson? I knew that was coming. I told Grover to keep going. Then I turned toward Mr. Bunner. Sir? Mr. Bunner had this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old and had seen everything. You must learn the answer to my question, Mr. Bunner told me. About the Titans, about real life, and how your studies apply to it. Oh, what you learn from me, he said, is vitally important. I expect you to treat it as such. I will accept only the best for you, Percy Jakson. I wanted to get angry. This guy pushed me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in suit of Roman armor and shouted, What ho! And challenged us, sword point against chalk, to run to the board and name every Greek and Roman person who ever lived and their mother and what god they worshipped. And what god they worshipped. But Mr. Brunner accepted me to be as good as everybody else, despite the fact that I have dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, and I had never made above the C in my life. No, he didn't accept me to be as good. He accepted me to be better. And I just couldn't learn all those names and facts, much less spell them correctly. I mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Brunner took one long sad look at the still like he'd been at the girl's funeral. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. The class gathered on the front steps of the museum where we could watch the foot traffic along Fifth Avenue. Overhead, a huge storm was brewing, with clouds blacker than I'd ever seen over the city. I figured maybe it was global warming or something because her weather all across New York State had been weird since Christmas. We'd had massive snowstorms, flooding, wildfires from lightning strikes. I wouldn't have been surprised if this was a hurricane blowing in. Nobody else seemed to notice. Some of the guys were pelting pigeons and Lunchables crackers. Nancy Buffett was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's purse. And, of course, Mrs. Dawes wasn't seeing a thing. Grover and I sat at the edge of the fountain, away from the others. We thought that maybe if we did that, everybody would know we were from that school, the school for loser freaks who didn't make it elsewhere. Detention? Grover asked. No, I said. Not from Bruner. I just wish he'd let me something. I mean, I'm not a genius. Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was going to give me some philosophical comment to make me feel better, he said, "Can I have your apple?" I didn't have much of an appetite, so I let him take it. I watched the steam of the cows going down Fifth Adventure. And thought that my mom's apartment only a little ways up down from where we sat. I hadn't seen her since Christmas. I wanted so bad to jump in the taxi and hurry home. She'd hug me and be glad to see me, but she'd be disappointed too. She sent me right back to Yancey, reminded me that I had to try harder, even if this was my sixth school in 6 years and I was probably going to be kicked out again. I wouldn't be able to stand in the sad look she'd give me. Mr. Bonner parked his wheelchair at the base of the handicap ramp. He ate celery while he read paperback novel. A red umbrella stuck out from the back of his chair, making it look like a mortised cafe table. I was about to unwrap my sandwich when Nancy Buffett appeared in the front of me with her ugly friends. I guess she'd gotten tired of stealing from the tourists and dumped her half-eaten lunch in Grover's lap. Oops, she grinned at me with her crooked teeth. Her flickers were orange, and as if somebody had spray painted her face with liquid Cheetos. I tried to stay cool. The school counselor had told me a million times how to get control of your temper, but I was so mad my mind went blank. A wave rolled in my ears. I don't remember touching her, but the next thing I knew, Nancy was sitting on the butt of in the fountain, screaming, "Percy pushed me!" Mrs. Dawes mortalized next to us. This is end of part 1. Bye!